Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. I don't know about you, but I've been following the Alex Murdaugh trial for the last several weeks with rapt attention. The South Carolina attorney was found guilty yesterday of murdering his wife and son. During the trial, there was so much testimony and so many terms that were used. One of them was family annihilator. This is a term that was put out there by the prosecution's lead attorney, Creighton Waters. And that term stuck with me. I'd never heard it before. And so this morning, as I was cataloging back issues of military images, I happened upon the photo here, which is connected to an 1872 murder case that involves a Civil War veteran who's described as a survivor, a disturbed survivor of the conflict between the states, and also with a history of mental illness. These two children are Adelaide and Minda Porter, and they were born in the late 1860s. Their father was Irvin Porter, was in 24th Ohio Infantry, and according to all accounts, he served with distinction in the regiment throughout the Civil War. He was wounded at the Battle of Chickamauga. After the war, he seems to lead a perfectly normal life, a happy life. He marries in 1868, has the two children with his wife, whose name is also Minda, and they live on a farm in Columbiana, Ohio. All seems well. He goes into business with his brother. Some prosperity is happening, living a good life. Something happens in 1872. He snaps, he begins fighting with his brother, business clients, friends, and family. This condition worsens over a relatively short period of time. On the morning of December 12th, 1872, he has breakfast with his family, described as moody that day, sort of melancholy, eats breakfast, and then afterwards, this is when he murders his two daughters, the daughters pictured here, with a hatchet. He doesn't kill anybody else. He flees the house, leaving behind the hatchet, a horrible scene with the corpses of his daughters. Word spreads very quickly. Before lunch, the law catches up to him 10 miles away, where they find him in a saloon. He seems to be completely distraught, but beyond that, he's taken into custody. There is a trial. Leading up to the trial, the pre-trial description of him as, quote, melancholic with a history of mental instability comes out. Apparently, there were some issues in the family. He's also described, and this is where I led off with, a disturbed survivor of the conflict between the states. And so for those of you who study the Civil War, the idea of depression, of post-traumatic stress disorder, these conditions they're not described, they're not really known. And so it's really difficult to talk about Civil War psychological trauma. So often surgeons and doctors at the time are focused on the physical part of injuries, the wound at Chickamauga, those kinds of things, disease and other illnesses. But getting at the mental part is difficult. So when I see terms like melancholia, that's when I think about depression and PTSD. So in this particular case, and this is where it sort of mirrors the Murdoch trial in terms of the size and the scope, just like in 2023, back in 1872, in Ohio, you have teams of lawyers who get together. They call 85 witnesses to the stand over a period of weeks. The jury ultimately finds Porter guilty. One newspaper describes him as being there in the courtroom and receiving the verdict with, quote, stoic indifference. Just seems to mirror what happened last night if you're watching the outcome of the Murdoch trial. Porter winds up being hauled off to prison. He goes to the Ohio State Penitentiary, where he dies in 1879 at age 39. So there's today's story. You have the two victims pictured here, Adelaide and Minda Porter, and the story of a likely PTSD situation and a very lengthy trial that brings justice to these murdered children. So until the next time, we'll see you on the trail.